Thanks a lot, Abigail, and thanks a lot for the support of all your team in this preparation. It's a very great honor for us to be welcome in the HPP webinar live. We are very honored also to welcome colleagues here, 180 or more colleagues are registered to this event. We'll see how many we hire at the end. Why this webinar? The European Hospital and Healthcare Federation is involved in many different projects, but this one is very special in many regards. This is a European Finance Horizon project, and the first element we want to focus is that it's using real-world data and artificial intelligence. So we're not the only one, but the interest of the project is that we are not working on a single disease, which is a very important one, COPD, but also on complex chronic conditions, which is a trend nowadays in Europe and in the rest of the world anyway. We aimed with this project, of which we are a partner, to tailor-made care for shared decision-making and self-management. And that's also a key element you will see. In this webinar, for 2 hours, with question and answers, the resample team will present the key results. The project has ended, and that's the interest of us and all of you also, is to transfer knowledge about the results of this project. We have 3 speakers today, and we have also support from colleagues if there are question and answers on more digital aspects of the project. Those 3 speakers are key element, I would say, of the success of this project. First of all, the coordinator of the project, Professor Monique Tabak from the University of Twente. We will present the overall project. We'll get then the key highlights of the project on the clinical side from Dr. Anke Lenferink, also of the University of Twente. She was the clinical coordinator. And we'll get Dr. Serge Autexier, who is the technical coordinator of the project from the German Hospital Artificial Intelligence Agency. Don't forget, as Abigail said, that the chat is there for welcoming you, but the most important for us is to get your questions in the question and answer. And I will remind that to all of you also at each transition of presentation. That's important because we have devoted quite some time for the question and answer to be able to discuss with all of you. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Professor Monique Tabak, who has been and still is, because the project, although finished, is still alive, who has been the coordinator of the resample project. Monique, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Pascal. I will start presenting our project in a high-level overview, and for that I will first share my screen. So I hope everything is visible as it should be, and otherwise I hope to hear it. Okay, so I will I'll give you an overview at a glance of what we have been up to with our project. So how we have been building tailor-made care for people with COPD and comorbidities. But before we do that, we also like to get to know you a little bit. So we are a project team with all different backgrounds, and we are very curious on who is actually in the audience. So it would be great if you could answer the polling questions on the right side or right-hand side of your screen, and fill out what your background is. So it's a healthcare professional, policymaker, scientist, a manager, representative from the business, data analyst, or something else. So we can see the first answers already coming in. Many scientists, but also people from business, SMEs, healthcare professionals. And others. So I'm curious what the others are actually. So if you can introduce yourself in the chat if you would like to. So we also have a bit of an insight in who is part of this webinar. Questions are still still coming in, but I would like to close this one because we have another question. And that is the second polling question to get to know you a little bit, because we were wondering if you have any experience in applying real-world data and AI as part of clinical practice. And is that yes on a daily basis? Is that yes as a pilot in daily practice? Or no, only in research? Or no, never, I have never applied, or I have no experience in applying real-world data and AI in clinical practice? And again, the first answers are coming in. And what we see is that actually there's a minority of people answering A or B, so that do have experience. And there are some people having experience in research and also a large group having no experience in applying real data and AI in clinical practice. So yeah, we hope today that we can share our results and that you get some insights in how we have developed real data and AI applications that can be used for clinical practice, and then that you can that we can share our experiences with that. So also I would like to close this polling question. So now we can really start in introducing the project to you, and we would like to do that based on a patient. And this is Maria. She is 80 years old. You can see her on the picture, and she lives in a small town in the Netherlands near the city. And she loves the nature, used to do a lot of walking and does a lot of volunteering work to help those old people because she believes she is not that old. And her grandchildren live in the east of the Netherlands, and she would like to go there way more often, but she is often short of breath and feels anxious about that. And walking to the train station to go to her grandchildren is no longer possible. So what's going on with Maria? Well, actually, Maria has COPD, and also she has chronic heart failure. And COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, is a progressive chronic lung condition. And it actually happens a lot. So around 4 to 10% of the adult population in Europe is affected by COPD. And it has a high burden for patients. So it's characterized by a number of symptoms. So for example, shortness of breath, but also those symptoms are worsening over time. So it's a progressive disease. And it's also characterized by flare-ups. So those are temporary worsenings of the condition and of the symptoms. And often Maria, if she has a flare-up, doesn't fully recover from them. So it has a very high impact on the quality of quality of life of Maria, but also on her daily life activities. She cannot always do what she would like to do. But in case of Maria, unlike many patients with COPD, she also has another chronic condition, and that is called multimorbidity. And that those multiple complex chronic conditions make healthcare really complex. So there is an increase of patient burden, increase in costs, but also it increased to the complexity of healthcare because, for example, multiple healthcare professionals are involved. But it also makes it more difficult because symptoms can be overlapping. So shortness of breath can have different reasons. It can be because of the COPD, but it can also be a result of another complex chronic condition. So how do we know what's going on with a patient like Maria when there is a worsening of symptoms? So how does her patient journey actually look like now at the moment? So for Maria, she visits the hospital a couple of times a year for a regular checkup, and to make sure that her conditions are as stable as possible. And to make sure that it is as stable as possible, she has to do self-management. So she has to take her medication as well as possible, have to keep a healthy lifestyle, for example. But this is also quite difficult. And for the doctor, it's quite difficult, or for the healthcare professional, it's difficult because we don't actually know that well what's going on in the meantime. So how is Maria actually doing between those visits? And also for Maria, it's difficult to actually maintain self-management because there's not that much support. There are not enough healthcare professionals to provide support in self-management, keeping a healthy lifestyle, and taking medication, for example. And it also means that between those standard time-based visits, sometimes there are flare-ups. So those are the exacerbations, so the worsenings of the condition. And that those can even lead to hospitalization and definite worsenings of the disease. So we would really like to prevent those exacerbations, or at least to predict those exacerbations or the risk of exacerbations, because that could positively influence the quality of life, but also the quality of care. So at the moment, there is a shortage of healthcare professionals, but there's also a very high workload of healthcare professionals. So they cannot provide all the support that would be needed for now and in the future of Maria. Also, the healthcare is really planned and reactive, and there's limited insight. There's limited insight in what's happening with Maria, but also there's limited guidance in the lifestyle. That makes self-management difficult, and there's also no one size fits all. So Maria is an example of a patient, but there are many patients like Maria which have similar characteristics but are not the same, and each one requires personalized care. So this current setup and this care is good, but it's not sustainable, and we really need to rethink healthcare towards the future. So we think and we believe that we should focus more on prevention and on lifestyle, so we can prevent those worsenings and we can prevent deterioration, but also hopefully we can prevent the development of additional chronic diseases, and that we should provide tailored care at the right time and place, and that we go from reactive care towards proactive care, so we can provide timely treatment. And also that we provide more empowerment and self-management for the patient, and that we can provide care in the home environment. So this was the reasoning and rationale for why we started Resample. And Resample, as said, is our Horizon project that we just finished. And we had the aim to identify and predict the exacerbations of patients like Maria and develop a personalized treatment program by a multidisciplinary virtual companionship program, which is an e-health program for patients with COPD and complex chronic conditions. And we did that for 4.5 years in a multidisciplinary group. So we are with many partners that you can see also on the right side of your screen, that are on the one hand from the clinical and user side. So we have hospitals, for example, from the different countries in Europe. We have academia and research centers, and we have the technical innovation in industry as part of our consortium. So it's really a multidisciplinary consortium. And in that way, we were able to start from the knowledge-based, but also a stakeholder-driven development of this project, and where we use real-world data, but also privacy-preserving ICT, AI, to develop tailored intervention and integrated hybrid care paths. And I would like to show a short video of what we have been doing. So,
managing patients with multiple chronic conditions, like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and heart failure, is a major challenge for European healthcare systems. For these individuals, we need to move away from fragmented care pathways towards preventive, proactive, and integrated care. The Resample project delivers an AI-powered platform that uses real-world data and supports clinicians and patients with early risk prediction, personalized monitoring, shared decision-making, and coaching. Since August 2024, the platform has been live across partner hospitals, enabling secure real-world data and patient data collection, machine learning model training and validation, a clinical dashboards for monitoring, risk predictions, and shared decision-making, and a virtual companion for the patients with ongoing self-management support and coaching. Resample offers a scalable, privacy-aware tool to optimize chronic care management and reduce preventable hospitalizations through continuous co-creation and evaluation in integrated care pathways. Scientific results, data, models, and software are available following our open science policy. Resample sets a precedent for AI-enabled care in Europe to support patients with COPD and complex chronic conditions. Learn how your institution or policy framework can adopt or support this innovation and make use of our results via our website.
So this shows what we have been doing for the last 4.5 years and what we aim to develop. And now the question, of course, is how we did it. So we had a certain approach, and that approach was as follows. So first of all, we checked out, okay, what do we actually already know? So we looked into existing data, existing scientific literature, but also clinical guidelines. And we also found out what actually is known from the user perspective. So we interviewed and involved a lot of stakeholders and users to gain insight in the current healthcare process, but also we involved users throughout the project in the evaluations, for example, of our virtual companionship program. Then we also gathered new information. So we started a prospective cohort to assess for real-world data monitoring, so to assess new data in daily life, but also from the clinic to gain insight in what's not actually happening between those visits. So what's happening in the real world. And for that, we needed to have a platform. So we also have created a Resample platform, which is a privacy-preserving platform that enables real-world data monitoring. Based on that information and insights, we have created an intervention, which is the virtual companionship program. And within that intervention, we also, based on the data that we have gathered and the knowledge that we have gained, we have developed machine learning models for predictions of exacerbations, and also to create tailored advice within the virtual companionship program as part of shared decision making and coaching for the patients. And lastly, we have evaluated and integrated this whole care path in daily practice. And we have made sure that our results, as part of the evaluation, but also of our developments, are available for our stakeholders. So this approach, this stepwise approach, has resulted in our main outcomes, which is of course knowledge about COPD and CCCs, but also guidelines, e-health applications. It has led to the Resample infrastructure, and it resulted in an open science and open source approach to make sure that our results are available for all stakeholders. So this was our overall approach, and we would like now to dive a little bit deeper in what were the results of this approach. And first starting with Dr. Anke Lenferink, our clinical coordinator.
Thank you, Monique, and good afternoon to you all. I will first share my screen. Hopefully you are able to see it. Yes, so my name is Anke Lenferink. I'm assistant professor and epidemiologist from the University of Twente, and I'm really honored to show you some clinical highlights from the Resample study this afternoon. So I will first talk a little bit more about the insights that we got to COPD and also the complex chronic conditions and how we integrated e-health in daily care. And next to that, I will go into more detail on the e-health application. So we have developed a virtual companionship program, and also we have some more details on the predictions, the shared decision making and tailoring of it. But first of all, the knowledge and guidelines. So actually we did get insight based on 3 steps. So first we dived into the literature to look into what is already known about COPD and about the complex chronic conditions. We used retrospective data, so data from already existing studies. And last but not least, we used prospective data. So we started to conduct a cohort, and also we used that cohort later on to evaluate the virtual companionship program. So what do we learn from the systematic reviews? And we have done several reviews, but I would like to pick up on one of them, which is just published actually, and this is about the predictors of COPD exacerbations. And what we found that there are many models already existing for acute exacerbation of COPD, but not all of them are even promising as the other. So we tried to look into the literature that really had some specific categories of important predictors. So one of the categories was patient characteristics, and we saw that age is really an important predictor of COPD exacerbation, as well as a previous exacerbation. And when we looked into the symptoms, then the SGLQ, one of the health status questionnaires, was also a promising predictor for COPD exacerbations. Then we had other categories like in the biomarkers. Then we saw that fibrinogen is also an important predictor. As a lung function test, the forced expiratory volume in 1 second of percentage predicted was also an important predictor. And last but not least, we also looked into the composite scores, so a combination of scores. And then we found that the COPD gold status was also an important predictor for COPD exacerbation. So next to that, we looked into the retrospective data, so from existing clinical studies, and we were wondering how COPD and other chronic diseases are interplaying. So we tried to visualize symptom data of these patients. And in this case, I show Maria again. Maria has COPD and heart failure, and the COPD symptoms are reflected by the purple boxes, and the heart failure symptoms are reflected by the yellow red boxes. And what you can see is that there is some overlap in symptoms, as what we expected. Sometimes they are coexisting, but also sometimes the heart failure is only present. So what we also did is trying to visualize all the symptoms during the day and the intensity of the symptoms. And then if you then graph those symptoms, intensity scores, then you see that there's quite some overlap in deterioration of symptoms from COPD and from heart failure. We also use the data to try to see whether we can find any predicting information. So can we see that COPD symptoms do predict a heart failure exacerbation and vice versa? So on a group level, we saw that heart failure indeed is preceding COPD symptom increasement, and also vice versa. And on individual level, we especially saw that COPD symptoms do precede heart failure symptoms. And last but not least, we started the resample cohort. And we did that with 3 main aims. So first of all, we wanted really to optimize the data collection on the predictors of COPD exacerbations. Next to that, we wanted to collect the real-world data for risk profiling of the patients with COPD in the complex chronic conditions. And we wanted to evaluate the potential impact of a virtual companionship program. So all the patients started in a cohort with a cohort baseline visit, and after 6 months they had a 6 months follow-up visit, and that process was after each 6 months was repeated. Some of those patients also went to the VCP program, so they started again with a VCP baseline visit, and after 6 months a follow-up visit, and after 9 months of follow-up there was a final measurement. And we collected several real data from these patients, also collected from different data sources. And for a better understanding, I tried to summarize those in 6 main categories. So we looked into the patient characteristics, the comorbidities, some biomarkers, lung function parameters, symptoms, and also some composite parameters. And we have identified a key set of parameters that we found important, but what also the patients found important, and also I asked them what they would like to see as a good tool to measure these parameters. And in the end, we had 3 iterations of this data collection, so in which we find in the end defined a final set of parameters that we would like to collect to predict exacerbations. And this cohort was conducted in 3 clinical sites, in the Tartu University Hospital in Estonia, in MST Hospital in the Netherlands, and also in Gemelli Hospital in Italy. And we included patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and with at least one complex chronic condition that could, for example, be anxiety, depression, heart failure, or ischemic heart disease. And we used that data from the prospective cohort study to also find potential triggers for increased symptoms, because if we know what for that particular patient could be a potential trigger of his or her flare-up of the condition, then we could also better provide personalized care. So we again made some visualizations of the symptoms, and every time a patient had an increase of symptoms, we asked what could be the potential reason why you think that your symptoms are now increasing. So some of the patients indicated it could be medication use, others said it could be maybe an infection, or also weather conditions could be a potential reason for flare-up of symptoms. And in several interviews with patients as well as with the healthcare professionals, we asked them, how can such visualization of symptoms help you in to support your disease management? And what they indicated is that this really gives them insight in the relationship between diseases, so between COPD and the complex chronic conditions. It can help them in decision making, so what to do when symptoms are getting worse. And last but not least, it really helped them in self-management, so that they know what to do when symptoms do change. So I would now like to go into the e-health applications that we developed. So we developed a virtual companion for patients. We developed a clinical dashboard for healthcare professionals, and we conducted a resample virtual companionship program study to evaluate the potential of this program. So the virtual companionship program we developed to provide really tailored care and support for patients with COPD and the complex chronic conditions. So as you can see on this slide, we developed a virtual companion for patients that was a patient application the patient could use at their home. And also we have developed a clinical dashboard for the healthcare professionals with an overview of all the patients that are in the VCP, and also with the patient who had more symptoms, and also with alerts for the clinical at the clinical dashboard for the physicians. So what was included in the virtual companionship program? First of all, we developed the algorithms for self-management of COPD and the complex chronic conditions. And we started with every single patient asking the question, what are your usual symptoms? So at the daily basis. And if there is an increase in symptoms, the patients could be referred to an action plan. And that is then, for example, starts with self-treatment or to contact a healthcare professional for support. And this was all digitalized into the application of the patient. So we had the digitalization of diaries in which patients could complete and indicate whether or not symptoms had changed. And we had digitalized these action plans, so there was an automatic message if there was an increase of symptoms, what the patient had to do at that point in time. We also offered ongoing self-management support for patients, and that was based on self-management training sessions, group sessions and individual sessions in which patients were educated about COPD, about potential triggers, about medication that could use, but not only COPD, also about their complex chronic conditions. They learned how to recognize symptoms and how to monitor them by e-health diary that we offered via the application, and also how they could self-treat them via the action plans. And lastly, how to master their self-management skills. For example, their inhaler technique was checked, and also what they could do already on breathing exercises. And we offered them also self-management booklets in which there's background information on self-management skills, and also on all the information that was offered during the training sessions. Another important part of the VCP is the shared decision making and personalized coaching. So for each single patient, we offered individual goal setting, for example, on physical activity or on treatment adherence. And it was based on patient preferences and also on the risk profile of the patient. And we offered the patient tailored coaching dialogues based on the individual goal setting. So in this case, Maria had 1114 steps, and the message was there for Maria: dear Maria, your goal is to walk 5,500 steps. And if you go for a walk now, you will reach your goal. So this was set in the application. And next important point of the VCP is, of course, the integration in the care and in the daily life of the patient. So we developed an integrated digital care path and also a service model. And I don't expect you to read this, but it's really to show you that a lot of elements are included in the service model to make sure that that the resample solution is used how it's really also aimed for. So we also developed an integrated care protocol showing how patients could be onboarded, and also we included training materials for the healthcare professionals to offer this program to the patients. Then the last part of our resample project in the last year, actually, we conducted a VCP study. And this was to evaluate the clinical and economic feasibility of the virtual companionship program. So the patients had a baseline visit, a 6-month follow-up visit, and a 9-month end visit. And this was really to evaluate the potential impact of our VCP. And we looked into the clinical outcomes, like flare-ups of symptoms. We looked into the behavior impact, like the coaching modules. And we looked into the acceptance of the virtual companionship program, like the impact on team dynamics. And lastly, also the costs, so the social return on investment. And here you can see some baseline characteristics of our patients that were included in the VCP, 122. And they had a mean age of about 70 years, and 79% was male, and they had moderate COPD. If you then look into the clinical outcomes, then we saw that VCP patients had fewer symptom flare-ups, fewer hospitalizations, and fewer deaths. But I have to say that, of course, compared to the cohort, the VCP patients only had 9 months of follow-up. So this is not really a good good analysis. So you have to look into a comparison with equal follow-up time. And if you then look into the about 7 months before and 7 months after the introduction of the VCP, then we did not see any effect of the VCP on the average duration of COPD exacerbations. And this was data was completed for 77 patients. So these patients participated both in the cohort as well as in the VCP study. Then we did the same for hospitalizations. We saw also no effect of the VCP on all-cause hospitalizations. And we asked the patients by questionnaire what they preferred in decision making, and they indicated really that they would like to make decisions together. So really have a shared decision making with a focus on physical activity. Next to that, prevent COPD hospitalizations, and also to reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. And for the physical activity specifically, we saw that the VCP patient had an increase in daily step count. Then acceptance of our VCP, we looked into the tool team routine framework, and we saw for the tool, so the VCP, that this gives a clear value to all the stakeholders, but they also mentioned our tool is not yet integrated with the electronic health records. Then for the team, there was moderate team agreement, so on the problems worth solving, and it was indicated that the workload shifted towards the nurses. And if we look into the routine, then so how does our solution fit with the existing clinical workflows? Then it was indicated it increases proactive care, but it also gives some administrative burden. And the last point we addressed is to look into the economic feasibility of our solution. So we looked into the social return on investment. So what was the input for our VCP and what is the value that it brings to us? So we looked into the input for patients, for the hospital, and the value that it brings to us is reflected by the employer, by the patients, by the healthcare insurance, and by the hospital. And then we saw that the value actually is higher than the input. So we saw a social return on investment ratio of 2.81, and that is indicating that the VCP is profitable for the coalition of all the stakeholders. So some takeaways from the clinical results and clinical highlights of the sample. I think that we showed that we offer tailored care for COPD and comorbidities, and we look beyond one size fits all. We have achieved a body of knowledge for developing and providing AI-supported chronic care by getting insights into key parameters for predicting COPD exacerbations, and also get insights into symptom patterns and the interplay between COPD and comorbidities. Then second takeaway is that we optimize real data collection by using a dynamic cohort to really identify the key parameters to predict COPD exacerbations. And we use remote monitoring to get insights into patients' daily life. And a final key takeaway is that we offered proactive disease management supported by a virtual companionship program. On the one hand side, a virtual companion for the patient that provides ongoing self-management support and personalized coaching. And what we also showed is that we used a clinical dashboard for the healthcare professionals that enables shared decision-making based on patient preferences, data, and predictions. And then I would like to end with, again, a polling question. And that is, on what topic would you like to continue the discussions at the Q&A later on? Is that on remote monitoring? Is that on the dynamic cohort, predictors of exacerbations, virtual companionship program, or integrated care? And please indicate in the polling what you would like to hear more about. I see quite a few on the remote monitoring, also predictors of exacerbations, integrated care, and also virtual companionship program. So thank you for that. And if you have any specific questions on these topics, please don't forget to post them in the Q&A. And with that, I would stop my share to share my screen and hand over to Serge.
We have a little coffee break or tea break, if you wish, for the next 7 minutes before we pass the floor to our colleague Serge Autexier. See you all.
Pascal, the floor is yours.
Welcome back. Little reminder, don't forget to put your question in question and answer. We've seen a question in the chat. Anke nicely answered to that question, but please try to keep to the question and answers so that we can follow after the presentation of Serge. Serge Autexier was the technical coordinator, as I said, of the project. Will provide us with the key highlights on the project on that technical side. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'll try to share my screen. I hope you can see this now. Okay. So welcome as well from my side. I'm Serge Autexier. I'm from the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence in Bremen. And I'm happy to give you some insights on the technical results. So we focus on this last part here on the resample ICT infrastructure that was used and developed in the project to have real-world data monitoring, but also to have federated machine learning and all the privacy preserving aspects of the resample platform and what we could then deliver for the open science and open source results of the project. I'll start with give you a brief overview, videos recorded how the patients were using the app here in this case to onboard when they start in the studies. They provide their details. Then they have an initial questionnaire to check all the comorbidities and some additional information. So that is then included in the profile of the patients, the study participants in the Adventure system, and that is then also used in the studies. So on the clinical side, we had the so-called clinician dashboard, and this is what the hospitals could see, clinicians could see in the hospital. They could go and select some patients and then get the overview on the comorbidities. These are these colored dots on the top, the adherence to questionnaire responses, additional information about the patients they had provided, the patients have provided themselves, and then go on with more information about hospital data that was coming from the electronic health records, like the 6-minute walking tests that were performed at baseline or at the follow-up visits, similar for the blood tests that were performed and the results that were obtained. So this could all be seen by the clinicians, and then they had this machine learning part where they could get the results of the machine learning models that were trained for different target variables. Here we have a prediction of exacerbation for the next 6 months and how this risk evolved over time from left to right. This is what the clinicians could see, and then well, assess the situation, but also then later, as we will see, use that information for the shared care decision making. In addition to the predictions, we provided some information about the relevance of different features of the patient for the designated risk that the models have computed, like what is the influence of the current BMI level, the average daily steps they were performing, or the number of exacerbations they had in the last year. And then we see, based on the length and the colors of these variables, the impact. So red would be increase of risk, and the blue ones are reduction of risk on the actual calculated risk score. Further on, we had differences. So we had provided counterfactual information, so information that if we would, for instance, here increase the FEV1 percentage of predicted value by 0.08, then we would have a prediction that would go down from the previously 32% to 29%. And below we had also these simulations. This was for what if predictions that you can see always in the middle. Here it's the BMI value in the middle, and we see the current risk of 32%, and then provided also from the models when you would decrease the BMI by 5% here, then the risk would go down to 30%, and so on, so that all this information can be considered by the clinicians. For the shared care decision making, when the patients visit at a follow-up visit or at baseline, they are going through a questionnaire with the clinician that is asking different questions about physical activity, what are their preferences, what are their goals they could conceive, and how confident they are in order to be able to comply with the goals, and so on. So all this information was then recorded and stored in the system so that it can be inspected later on if there has been an evolution, for instance. And then here are the goal settings that he wants to do, or thinks he's able to do a certain number of steps per day. And this could then be included in the actual goal setting for the patient app, where this, as we have seen before briefly, that this is then taken into account, that there are reminders set that you could go for a walk, you have a certain amount of steps currently, and you could reach that. And this was all set up during the shared care decision making at the hospital, and then available in everyday life in between via the app. This is how this then looks like. Here we have the number of steps, and then on a daily level they get questionnaires that is from the VCP that we have seen before from Anke, and then they have to answer a question about the symptoms and then get reactions to this. And so if they have, for instance, here significantly higher symptoms than usual, according to the action plan that also Anke mentioned before, there are predefined reactions coming by a chatbot system from the Adventure app that is then giving the recommendations as detailed in the action plan for the patients. So this is how this looked like, and in order for the clinicians to see this, he can inspect all the answers provided by the patients, like the reports on symptoms, can go down into what the actual given advice was. Here was given you take your medications according to the action plan, but could also go into the detailed answers. What are the typical what were the typical responses to breathlessness, sputum volume, and so on the patients have provided in the app. So this can be done by the clinician while he's not seeing the patient, and can then react on this. This was in a very quick go through the different parts of the platform that we have developed, and I'll now give you a bit more insights how we did this. So in order to reach this type of support for clinicians and the patients in everyday life, we set up a typical machine learning development process that we collect patient data, then use that data to have machine learning model training for different target variables, and then use these trained models in order to provide these additional AI services like risk prediction, but also counterfactuals and explanations. and that then can be used for the shared care decision making. So the challenge, of course, is that we had, well, the nice challenge was that we have 3 different sites participating all over Europe, where patients were going for visits in the hospital. So we had the local hospital systems, but in addition, they were all using this Helvetia app that was also providing data. And since this is all sensible data, as we know, we wanted the data to stay where it's most securely stored, and this is in the hospitals. For this, not only to have it in the final system, but throughout the whole working of the whole project itself, we had a rigorous approach to comply with GDPR and have a secure and privacy-preserving mechanisms and procedures. And we had different stages that the project underwent. And so the first one, we started to clarify all the why we are processing all this data, which is the data, what's the data flow. Then we had to define the compliance level with the GDPR regulations, and we had to define the organizational and procedural requirements for the project, which included also that we have the data controllers, joint controllers, data processors, and accordingly contracts signed. We had a gap analysis conducted to see what are the requirements that were needed. And in the third step, then we conducted a risk analysis and a data privacy impact assessment that then resulted in requirements for security and privacy for also the final platform. We assessed the threats, the probability, the severity levels, and from there derived the measures that we wanted to implement in the whole platform. And then they were validated when the platform was there. So this was the whole security and privacy by design approach that we applied throughout the whole project. The platform itself provides patient data collection and curation in each local site from multiple sources, which means the hospital data, the Helvetia platform, but also the real-world data that were collected in addition from, for instance, air quality, weather information, and so on. And this was all harmonized and stored locally in the hospitals. On that basis, we set up this federated learning workflow where all the data remained locally, but the models were trained jointly, orchestrated by a central cloud, which never saw the data, but only the trained models. And in addition, we developed a further approach to do federated learning over encrypted data, so that we have partially encrypted data. The most sensitive parts were encrypted, and data processing, the machine learning training happened over encrypted data, and also in over this distributed data. That was also part of the development. As Monique said before, the platform was in production use and fully deployed in the 3 hospital sites for about for 1 year. It's fully GDPR compliant, and all the core components that we have developed in the project and all used in the project are free software and under a corresponding license. So for the platform support itself, it offers patient monitoring and alerts, as we have seen briefly in the demo. It provides these machine learning predictions for the next 6 months that can be used for decision making, including information of about why the models, or on which features the models actually base their predicted risks, and having also this what if analysis available, and that is all published in the corresponding publications down there. Next is the whole ecosystem is, of course, not only the resample platform, but it's also the Helvetia system itself, which provides the patient app that is providing also the clinician dashboard software, so that clinicians can manage the studies and visualize all the collected information. And also as part of this dashboard, since it was already used by clinicians in the hospitals, we added these additional machine learning components that can then easily be visualized, as we have seen before, together with all the other health data from the patients. And that is also in one of the latest publications that's about to come out here in December. So just deep diving a bit what we have learned in the machine learning models themselves. So on the left, we see a list of the variables that are coming from the hospitals. So baseline data, the smoking pack years, BMI, FEV1 percentage of predicted, the number of exacerbations in the last year, quality of life score related here, the EQ5D, and also the COPD assessment score that is always performed, blood test results, and also used medication. So this is all data that was coming from the hospitals. And on the right, we had the list of features coming from real-world data. So this is a symptom score, actually a weighted symptom score over the last 15 days, the number of average steps, and also the resting heart rates. And then from the environment data collected at the from the area where the patients live, we had the mean temperature and humidity information included and used for the model training. We had about more than 2,000 retrospective patient data sets that were, of course, missing the real-world data. And we had about more than 150 prospective patients on which this model training was then based. The target variables were, as we said before, the exacerbation within the next 6 months, the FEV1 percentage of predicted, that is also predicted over the next 6 months, and the CUT score in 6 months, as well as the EQ5D score. For the exacerbation, that's classification problems, we had an accuracy of 88.3%, and that was a model that actually used physical activity data to base the prediction on. For the FEV1 percentage of predicted, we had a mean average error of 6.39, which is on the scale from 0 to 100, which is also not too bad. The CUT score has had a mean average error of 4.54, which is a level scale from 0 to 40, so that's also not too bad. The EQ5D score was a score that's actually going, or technically, from minus 0.6 to 1, and we had a mean average error of 0.1. The only one that was not based on physical activity data, at least the best model that we could train, was the CUT score prediction model. A bit, let's say, downside of this is that the model fitness were all kind of moderate only. So we had a recall of 50% for the classifications, and the others were around 0.5, 0.58 of R2 score, which is, from the model fitness, moderate. Nevertheless, we inspected the impact of the real-world data on the predictions, because this was one of the main targets of the project to investigate this. So we had physical activity that consistently showed up as a predictor for different outcomes. So we see here for the lung function, so the FEV1 percentage of predicted, we have steps per day of below 3,500, then it's negatively affecting this. And when it's going above that, up to 6,000 steps per day, then this keeps on increasing. Similar for the EQ5D. We had for the resting heart rate, also collected from these devices, we saw them coming up as strong and consistent patterns as predictors. So we had For the upper one, for the exacerbations, we have heart rates that are below 65 beats per minute, are negatively affecting the exacerbation risk, while upper levels, so it's improving in the sense. And when it's going above that, then the risk is increasing. Similar for the FEV1 percentage of predicted, it's again around this 65, 60 beats per minute area where we see that there is a change, and as well for the EQ5D, where we also have this pattern. For the patient-reported symptoms scores, we also see that when we have scores that are around 4, if we have the symptoms coming up over 3 or 2 days, then the risk for an exacerbation starts increasing and keeps on increasing, yeah, not too strongly, but it's going up. And similar for the CUT score, so the affectance by the COPD disease also is affected by this weighted symptom score from the beginning. So the score is anyway from 0 to 40, so it's clear that it's only going up. Regarding the environmental data, the only relevant thing we found were the temperature. So this is now temperature in Kelvin here on the scales on the bottom. So 273 is 0 degrees Celsius, and 20 degrees Celsius would be 290 something. And here we can see also for the risk of exacerbation, the risk is below or going down when we are between 0 and 10 degrees, and also for the CUT score. So what we see on the left is so the Y levels is the impact. So we see values below 0 reduce the outcome or the predicted outcome, and levels above 0 increase the predicted outcome. So these are normalized scores scales here, but essentially this is the information. So when it's above 0, then it's increasing, and when it's below 0, it's reducing the risk. So this were the analysis of the results of the last machine learning models that we could train. So what we have this open research policy. So we have the software, which includes source code, but also binary distributions in Docker containers. We have created syntactic data from the actual collected patient data, so that is easy to be provided. Then we have anonymized prospective patient data, and we have models, these predictive models that have been trained on the synthetic data sources. This is all published on Zenodo, which is an OpenAI EU initiative, and we have created a resample community there. The QR code will lead you directly to the website. And so we have published all the above information there and everything under the UI. And this is then also compliant with all the FAIR principles. This is what this looks like. So we have the environmental data manager. That is the data where you can simply set up and specify countries and zip code areas, and then it continuously collects all the environmental data for you, and you can retrieve that and then put it together with the rest of your patient data. We have the resample platform itself that is published in open source, but also as Docker containers, which is on the right. Then we have this federated model training over encrypted data, developed also by the University of Twente, that is also provided there to be reused. And then we have the anonymized patient data sets from Gemelli currently. That has restricted access, so you would have to go to ask Gemelli for permission, and there's a clear process set up how you can obtain access to this. Then we have these trained models, trained on some synthetic data, and also the training data set that was used to train these models, all available on Zenodo for download. The takeaways. The first one is that we have created this research and innovation platform for federated learning and to be used in hospitals, and that has actually been deployed and integrated in a productive hospital environment. So that was for us a major achievement, that we could really have those systems running, these edge nodes running in the hospitals and be used here for model training, but also for the using the models for predictions. And we believe it could serve as kind of blueprint for the privacy by design research platforms for similar or analogous data-driven health research. We have provided some evidence in the final models that collecting real-world data can help disease management, but as this is based on models that have a moderate fitness, this would need further confirmation, further investigations. But at least with the variables that we have identified, that provides good starting points to continue in this direction to seek confirmation. Everything, data and software is findable and reusable in an open access archive, and we're happy if that is taken up and continued. These were the takeaways from the technical insights, and I also have a few polling questions here for the Q&A sessions, how to continue, what you would be specifically interested to discuss on the technical aspects for the deployment of the research platform in healthcare environments, so real and productive deployment, privacy preserving health data aggregation from multiple sources, aligning and curating the data coming from different sources and also with different frequencies, the usability of the predictions, so actually those provided to the clinicians would also be a nice topic. And also we had the action plan that Anke presented earlier for COPD, but also for the comorbidities. So how putting this into an algorithm that can actually work in such as everyday life self-management system. I have more details, more insights on this. And I see so the answers coming in. I'm seeing not everything here, but I see some for the deployment coming in, 20%. For the second one as well, the usability of the predictions, also an interesting topic here. I have only 1/3 of answers provided, so if there are a bit more, maybe don't hesitate. There might have been more in the chat that I could not follow. I have only seen one reaction in the chat, but if you have more, if you would like to have more information, just select it here. Yeah. We still have deployment on the top, usability second, privacy preserving health data following, and the curation of data with different frequencies. So the action plan algorithms are apparently less of interest here. But that gives already, we were nearly half through, 56% missing still. But at least there's a clear interest in A and D. So I guess we can, continue with that. That finished the technical presentations of the project, and we'll discuss more of this in the session at the Q&A at the end of the project. And with that, I would hand over again to Monique, who would share her screen then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Serge, for the technical overview. Would someone give me the right to share my screen? Yes, thank you. So, of course, you have now seen a lot of information. We have done a lot in those 4.5 years, and we've done actually a lot more, which we did not tell. But still, of course, it's a lot to process in just this short of time. So what we have been doing, so our main outcomes as a conclusion is that we, on the one hand, gained insight in new knowledge and guidelines. So we gained insights in COPD and comorbidities, but also how we can integrate e-health applications like the virtual companionship program as part of daily care, and how we should do that. We have developed e-health applications, so the virtual companionship program for self-management, but also how to include AI and risk prediction, shared decision making, and tailoring in such a program. And we have developed the Resample ICT ecosystem, so that consists of the real-world data monitoring, the federated machine learning, but also the intervention with the virtual companionship program, which is also a privacy-preserving platform. And we made sure that, of course, all our results are, or the results are as much as possible available by open science and open source. So as said already by Serge, it's open data models, but also the protocols, the training materials, videos, and there are a lot of publications already, and we are still busy analyzing data and writing publications. So more is coming. So all our information, so today we just provided our information at a glance. Everything is linked from the project website using the OIs, so you can find more information on the Resample website, the publications, but also general media, open or public deliverables, and also how we actually handle the open research data, so what our policy is. And also, as just shared by Serge, we have our Zenodo community, so our zone from Resample, where you can also find indeed the data and so on. And we have more information and videos as well as on our YouTube channel if you want to have overviews of what we did for our project, but also some background information about certain methods that we have applied. So in the end, of course, where we started with, I would also like to end with. So what we did, we wanted to do this project for patients like Maria. And of course, Maria is not a real patient. It's just an example of a patient, but she is an example that is important. And for her, we started this project. And as some quotes from patients that actually use the virtual companionship program, because of Resample, I have more self-confidence as I have better insights in my health status. And of another patient, Resample increased my curiosity in disease management. So we really hope that we have contributed to patients like Maria in supporting their self-management and gaining more insight in their disease and how they can deal with that. So for the general takeaways, today, as said, are our results and our outcomes at a glance, and there will be more to follow, so it will be continued. But so far, Resample demonstrates how digital health, but also AI and patient-centered care can support in transforming chronic disease management. So, and by integrating AI monitoring and this care into clinical workflows in daily life, it can support healthcare professionals to deliver proactive personalized care, but also it can empower patients by self-management support, personalized coaching, and shared decision-making. And our federated privacy-preserving ecosystem enables the secure data use and also supports open science. And of course, we could not do everything. So it's not a project of like 20 years, but we did provide a blueprint, and I hope that we really contribute to the journey that we all have to take towards future-proof healthcare, and that resample can be a blueprint as such. As said, there is a lot of more information, a lot of more detailed insight. So this can be found on our website. So there are a lot of publications where you can read more, and please check out the information over there. So with that, I would like to give the floor back to Pascal so we can start our Q&A session.
Thanks a lot, Monique. Thanks a lot, Serge. Thanks a lot, Anke. We had questions actually in the chat. It seems that it was not easy to understand where was the question and answers. Two of the questions in the chat have been already answered by Anke and another by Sophia. So I don't want to come again to that. You find the answers on the chat. The other question, still also on the chat, I would like to give to you is, first of all, there was a general question about the relation between the project and the AI, Artificial Intelligence Act, / European Health Data Space. Where does this project fit was a key central question in this. I don't know if you want to answer or if I should give the other questions, but I see Christos is with us, so maybe Christos would give us a flavor about where this project fits into the legislation of the European Union in construction. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal, and thank you also, Sasha, for the question. Actually, yes, one of the challenging part of this project was the alignment with the GDPR regulation from an organizational but also technical point of view. This was our expertise in this project. And until the project ended, the AI Act also came into force. So this also raised some, let's say, not concerns, but some thoughts about how the work that we have done can contribute to this direction or not. And actually, we had a positive conclusion on that question, because the AI Act and the requirements that the AI Act sets, especially for systems that are considered as high-risk systems, processing personal data with the use of AI, and also are considering high risk due to the categories of data that they use, like the personal data and the health situation. Our framework, our GDPR compliant framework that we proposed in the context of resample, actually can be the first step of analyzing this type of AI systems in order to end up in a safe conclusion on which level this system falls under the AI Act, and actually make the preliminary analysis in order to conclude, to prepare the compliance study, the compliance check that AI demands, especially for the high-risk systems. So the long story short is that our GDPR framework proposed in this project, because it combines cybersecurity-related aspects along with the GDPR requirements, is a valuable tool that can be used from every beneficiary, from every entity that wants to conduct the compliance analysis also for the high-risk systems under the AI Act. So I think that this project made also a huge step for contributing to the preliminary steps for conducting the AI Act compliance checks. Of course, the European Health Data Space, something that we foresee, something that will come in the next 2 years, already prepared. But again, as we saw from the legislation, the initial steps that are required, I mean, the information that you need to collect and the first steps that you need to address in order for patients to be able to move the data around EU in a safe and GDPR-friendly way. Again, our framework can support this type of analysis because, as I said, it takes under consideration both the security and privacy aspects in all levels of regulatory, organizational, and technical. So I think that, yes, both of these aspects, although they came after the project has started, our framework contributes a lot in both of these directions.
Since you have the floor, there was another question related to patient consent. Did patients provide consent for the reuse of their data in the project?
Yes, of course. As patients, they provide consent, but we didn't stay only at the consent. We had a very good organizational measures internal the consortium as well. So we had, besides the grant agreement, we had also some joint agreements between the hospitals that participated in the studies. So we passed the GDPR organizational measures not only in our solution, but only as the organizational part of the consortium per se. So we took the consent in every hospital, and we also took separate consents also for the anonymization of data as it's required by GDPR.
Since we are talking about patients, and it's a question for all the group, how were the patients involved in the design of the VCP of resample? Who wants to answer?
Maybe I can go first.
Yeah.
So the patients were involved, first of all, by having workshops with them. Like we asked them questions like, what parameter do you think is important to measure your symptoms, for example, in your daily life, and what happens in your daily life? And also we discussed with the patients all the data that we collected, like, is it too much? Do you want us to dive into more detail on certain aspects? What do you think is important that we know of your disease, so that we can provide you better support in that? So that's how patients were really included in the design of the cohort. And next to that, of course, we did the VCP study, and we asked the patients before we started with the virtual companionship program, what do you think are important aspects that we need to address during the virtual companionship program? So what are really the elements that you think are important to help you to support in self-management? And that we did also within interviews with the patients. And next to the patients, we involved the healthcare professionals as well, and also some experts in the field. And we had an advisory board to look into the selected parameters that we had selected from the literature together with the patients, to get their advice on what we really need to measure and what not. So we had actually a really dynamic design, and we try to involve them at several steps in our research to come to this solution of resample.
Thanks a lot, Anke. I start with another question in the chat, which is a very nice message. It looks like a wonderful blueprint. Can the app be generalized with the proper specific modification to other chronic conditions, and particularly to those related to the aging population? And I'll come back with more technical question after that.
So I think this application is really also generalizable to other chronic conditions, as we had also included in our population, because the patient not only has COPD, but also other important chronic conditions that are part of this aging population, like chronic heart failure, like anxiety and depression symptoms. So I think yes, and of course we tried really to adapt our program to the specific conditions that were present for that particular patient. So if the patient had COPD in combination with anxiety, we only address the action plan to those specific conditions. So I think yes, but of course for the predictors for flare-ups of comorbidities can be slightly different than those from COPD exacerbations that we focused on in this project. But I think the application itself is very well generalizable to the other conditions.
Thank you. There was also, again, in the chat, a series of questions, and I start with it. Did you publish any subgroup analysis for COPD patients with different severities? And if yes, did the algorithm perform better at predicting acute events for patients of different COPD severity levels? For example, for later stage patients who have been prescribed a ventilator, you may also have collected ventilator data, to inform the algorithm to them. Serge?
No, we have not performed that. There was no, actually, well, two things. There was no time anymore at the end. I think that was one thing. It was a lot of work already to get that support done for the VCP. And then it's also when we look at the comorbidities that we had included, and if you break this down to, if you partition the available set of patients that we had enrolled to the individual comorbidities or combinations of comorbidities, because this is what you would have to look into, then we get very small groups. And so the question is how relevant the results are or would have been then. So this is something that would have still to be conducted.
And now we have questions in the question and answer column. The first one, thank you for the presentation. Always credibility addressed for the patient-provided data. I'd assume adherence would decrease with time, as well as patients being less likely to complete their questionnaire when not experiencing flare-ups. Anyone to answer this one?
So I think indeed we had to deal with missing data. So what we did is that we, as a consortium, defined beforehand when do we call it missing data and what data do we have available around those missings to have an idea of what was happening in daily life. So for example, if we had missing data on the diaries, then if there were 3 days or less missing, then we assume that we can carry forward the day before the missing data and transfer backwards the day that is known after the missing data. So we had some assumptions in place to deal with missing data. And if we look into the adherence, especially in the VCP, we ask every day to the patient to complete the questionnaires. And if not, there was a reminder as well. And I think that if the patient also sees the added value of that supported program, that the adherence would not really decrease. So that's also what we did not find in our did not see back in our data. So this was really based on a previous study that we did with paper versions, and there we did see 88% of the questionnaires that were completed during 1 year. And I have not yet looked into the specific percentage of this data from example, but we of course had some patients who had a lot of missings, but the majority did really well adhere to at least our program. And now, of course, it would be interesting to also look into the patterns of adherence. So what did they do during the years that they followed? And also, did that result to other clinical outcomes? So are the patients who were less adherent to our program also the patients who are worse? Or is there another reason why they were less adherent? So that's what we have not yet time, but we will look into.
Thank you, Anke. I continue with the question and answer from the question and answers list, and then I maybe come back to the chat because there are still some confusion. Did your pilot require regulatory approvals or health system integrations agreement? And a related question, which policy incentives were critical for adoption? For example, reimbursement, coding, quality metrics? So two separate questions from the same person. Who wants to answer?
I can take maybe the first one, first part. Of course, so the first thing I think what was really helpful that we had this security and privacy by design approach from the beginning of the project, also on the organizational level, so that gave us all the documents, the structures, and also all the mechanisms implemented in the software that we could then take and go to the hospitals, the IT departments, and present all our mechanisms so that we have a trustworthy system here that they could integrate. Of course, the only regulation in some sense, there are probably internal hospital regulations, but they are all different in the different countries to some extent. Of course, we were running under the umbrella. We are an EU-funded research project, and it's not just any some hospital to which we went, but it was a participating hospital. So that was also part of why we could, in the end, do this as part of the project. And I think these were the things we looked at or had to comply with during the project. But of course, even though we had data processing agreements also with the hospitals and everything, we still, of course, our system never went into the inner parts of the hospital in IT systems. They stayed on the boundary. They were protected, of course, behind the usual firewalls, but we could never access any of the hospital systems. And the system was also designed in that way that it was only, except for the participation in the federated learning, it was only providing the data either to be submitted from a hospital system into our system or to be retrieved as part of the clinician dashboard. We never had any mechanism that was somehow from our system pushing data into hospital or retrieving actively data from the hospitals. And I think this was all part of the story, why in the end the hospitals were approving that we can install it there and run it. For the policies, I don't know who could take it.
I can take the policy incentive. So the question was which policy incentives were critical for adoption.
Right.
So is that reimbursement, coding, quality metrics? Of course, we have started Resample, of course, in the end, to provide a blueprint to change healthcare, so that policymakers can make a change and see that this is an alternative that fits the future-proof healthcare. So in building the platform, indeed, as explained many times, for example, it's fair. So which is also needed. Some of the integrated care protocols are scalable. So in that way, it provides the ability for adoption not only in the 3 hospitals that we did it, but also for other hospitals. But of course, it's not yet that far that it's actually already adopted throughout Europe. But we did take into account the measures that are needed for that. So we still need to do additional analysis with regards to the impact and the cost effectiveness, for example. But we did take into account these metrics to inform policymakers for these types of healthcare changes.
And a question somehow related in the chat that is not a question and answer. What would be the appropriate or optimal scale to implement the Resample platform in clinical practice? The answer of the person is likely not individual hospitals, maybe per region, a question mark. And all will continued improvement of predictive model, but also user interface and functionality be updated across the local or regional implementation of the platform.
Yeah, so I can start and maybe someone, Anke or Serge, you could take over. So I think, of course, we now started a platform based from a secondary healthcare, so from a hospital perspective, that is connected to the patient. Of course, this is not the whole care path that or patient journey that the patient is part of. So patients can also have healthcare professionals that are not in secondary care, but more in primary care. So a next step for further development and also is indeed, for example, a more regional approach where you can also connect the other regional healthcare providers. So we did that, for example, as part of the healthcare within Italy, but it could be extended to different healthcare professionals and a broader regional healthcare. That would be a very nice next step. Maybe you have any additions, Anke or Serge?
I can add a bit as well. I think so. Currently, we have built one platform that is doing the data collection, the model training, and providing the services for the predictions. I think in order to be deployed in that, at least in the way I understand the question here, I think one would have to maybe separate those things. The parts that are only concerned with model prediction and providing all this as part of an interface to the clinicians. That could be one part of the system that could even be installed locally. So that was one of the ideas that we had with the, let's say, edge node, which includes just the latest version of a predictive models and then provides the services locally based on the local data that is uploaded. So that could be one avenue to explore. And then have still continuous data collection from the patients and feeding us in this way, by this federated learning approach, the continuous training of a joint model, taking all the patient data into account, either regionally or beyond, as we did. And then regularly provide updated models that have been checked and approved, that are then deployed in the individual edge node. So that could be one approach to do this.
Yes, and I have maybe a very small addition that we might also further look into the social support and the social environment of patients. So really move it towards homes of patients and their maybe their spouses or their partners that can also help them in supporting them with self-management, especially in this time of increasing demands in healthcare and also a shortage of healthcare professionals. So there's also a lot that can be already arranged in the direct environment of the patient.
Thank you. A question, again, on a question and answer. When a patient or clinician acts on a model prediction, for example, modify the behavior after an alert, does, and if yes, how, given privacy concern, or does that feedback get integrated in the training data? Serge?
Yes, I can say something about that. So first, the system never, or at least the AI part, never reacts directly to the patient. It always goes to the clinician. So what is going directly to the patient are the action plan reactions that have been detailed, but there's no AI as part of that. For the second part, for the clinicians, we have, of course, implicitly, if the advice, so it's essentially this setting up of new goals or asking if it's a serious alert, asking the patient to come to the hospital and so on. We would see that in the data, but we are currently not recording let's say, that intervention per se in the local data to have it as an extra variable, because that was also part of the VCP part where we tested the system. So this could not be used again for model training, and it was clear that we could not use that. But one could maybe store this as if one would continue all this and have these models in place, one could add this extra bit of information that there was a specific shared care decision-making setting or reaction to an alert and interaction with the patient in addition in a certain point in time. That could be additional information that could be used or picked up by the models. The point is one would have to see how to align this with all the rest of the data, since we have a lot of data at different frequencies as well, how to organize this in a well manner so it can be handled. But that's a good question, but we could not address it as part of this project.
Thank you, Serge. Did you face any issues with standardization, is another question, of the different collected metrics to provide feedback through the chatbot function? I imagine the personalized metrics of each user have different norm ranges, which would have an effect on the final decision-making with the practitioner. So issues with standardization of the different collected metrics.
Yeah, maybe I can take this question. So of course, we had set up general algorithms for patients and how the chatbot needs to respond on that. But we try to personalize it with using data and reference data from each single patient. So, for example, the patients needed to indicate what are their usual symptoms on a daily basis, and that can be different from another patient. So it's their own reference, and if there was a change, then the chatbot reacts to that and suggests an action that the patient can take. And also there were individual goal set by the patients in collaboration with the healthcare professional. So the patient indicated on what goal he or she would like to work on in the coming months, and then the messages were actually tailored to that specific goals that were indicated by the patients. Of course, we have a limited set of that. So in further projects, we really would like to extend that with other domains and with even more personalized messages. But at least we try to come up with those messages and actions that for that specific patient was the most important at that point in time.
Thank you, Anke. I do not have any more questions. I hope I didn't forget one. There was a little question in the middle, but I don't know to who it was referring. It was place of residence. Was that data from indoors or outdoors? But since I don't know on which slide it was, maybe it rings a bell.
I think this is related to the data about the environment that we collected for the patients. So this was outdoor data.
Outdoor.
So it was based on the, let's say, the standard data collection about the weather, not indoor, because this would have required to have additional sensors or equipment at the patient's home to have access to this data and to collect it, and we did not do this.
Thank you, Serge. I think we've run out of questions, and it was already quite a lot for such quick answers. Thanks a lot for all of you to contribute to this session. I leave the floor now to Monique for the closing.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if you have any other household messages, so I will give the floor back to you as well, Pascal, at the end. But I think we can look back into to a nice webinar. So thank you for being here and for listening to us and asking the questions. I think, of course, we started a long time ago, so 4.5 years ago, with an idea on how to improve healthcare of Maria. And I think now looking back on those years, I think we can be really proud of what we have achieved as a consortium, and also as a really multidisciplinary consortium. So we came from really different backgrounds, and that is also, I think, the need to make these things happen. So you can only work on future-proof healthcare when you really do that with all the different disciplines together. And I think we can really be proud of our consortium. I'm really proud of the consortium that we actually made that happen, that we were able to talk and to understand each other and really took the patient perspective, the clinician's perspective, the technical perspective all into account and worked on the resample ecosystem. So that is so also for those from the consortium that are here, a big thank you for everyone for all your efforts in those 4.5 years that we have been working very nicely together. And also, as said, this is a starting point for future-proof healthcare, and it can serve as a blueprint, not only from a technical perspective, but also how to integrate these ecosystems in daily care. So how can you build a service model and the integrated care protocols? But it's not a blueprint, it's a starting point. So we need to continue with it. And it's also an invitation to all of you also here present. So we really like to get in touch if you have ideas also for follow-up or if there are any additional questions on what we did. So please let us know. We're very happy and open for further collaborations, for further analysis of our data. So please let us know. We will be happy to continue this journey towards future-proof healthcare. So I hope to see you back in maybe some other way and to continue working. So I would like to give the floor back to you, Pascal.
Many thanks, Monique, and on behalf of all the consortium, thanks for your very nice leadership. It has been really a pleasure. It's a little note of the project here, but I think it has been really immensely important for us to be with you in this project. Thanks also for the speakers and the colleagues who have been listening and asking questions. So it was not easy sometimes to follow, but we're very, very glad we had you with us. You have seen in the chat, or maybe not, but I repeated that the presentation and the recording will be made available after the webinar. You will receive, if you're registered, and you registered if you are attending to this, you will receive it by email. But as Monique said, this is just the beginning, and we hope to see you soon in another kind of event. Thanks a lot. Thank you.